Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of r/ProRevenge. My name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to bringing you guys today's top stories. Before I do though, I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button, as well as have notifications turned on, that way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. 3 strikes and you're out? Cool, I got this. I work in sales, and we work as a team. I have an assistant who helps me get leads and sets appointments. Well, this one particular assistant and I did not get along at all. This particular assistant kept going to my boss behind my back to report every little incident, which is really fucking annoying. Part of my role as the senior rep was training. However, this assistant was a former business owner and knew how to do the job and didn't need no help. Well, the appointments the assistant set up had an 80% no-show rate, which is insane. In the past, no-shows would be around 25 to 30%. Not only that, the assistant would constantly argue and bicker over everything, which is really frustrating to deal with. This assistant also created their own lead card and tracking system, which completely sucked and crap fell through all the time. Furthermore, about half of all contact details provided didn't actually work. But what really irked me the most was that this assistant constantly sucked up to my manager about all the great things they're doing. My manager was in love with the assistant and kept preventing me from firing them and replacing them. Now, our company had a little-known policy. 3 ethic complaints in a 12-month period and you're fired. Here's the deal though. For a customer to file a complaint, they had to go to a specific page on our website, so very few complaints ever got filed. One day, I roll in 10 minutes late. My assistant had called my manager to complain that I was late. My boss asked me why I'm late. Keep in mind, we didn't clock in or out, and I would often come in early or stay late. Coming in late once in a while was no big deal, but it was annoying knowing my assistant had a habit of constantly going behind my back and ratting me out on top of their crappy production. We're supposed to be a team. I asked to do a review of the assistant's leads. We got 3 leads deep, and my assistant huffed and puffed and said that the leads belonged to them, not me, and it's none of my business. Actually, it is. Then they called my boss to complain about my behavior because I was pushing them to complete the lead review. My boss called me and I straight up told him he needs to give me the authority to fire this assistant or I'm gonna force his hand. He told me I needed to learn how to work with my assistant, so I pulled up all of the assistant's leads and began dialing. One thing that would justify an ethics complaint is opting in a lead for a call when they didn't want to be called, which I suspected I could find at least 3 instances of. I called all the leads and I got 9 people who straight up said, "We never intended to be opted and given sales calls." To which I replied, "I'm really sorry to hear that. We actually have an ethic complaints page for such a situation. Would you like me to forward you the link so you can file a complaint? It would really help us ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen again." Within 48 hours, my assistant had gotten 5 ethics complaints. My boss called me 72 hours later. "Sting, it's really strange we've gotten a slew of complaints about your assistant. Did you have any parts in this?" Well, you see, my assistant refused to conduct a lead review with me, so I called all their leads for them. On a few occasions, the leads claimed they didn't intend on providing their information for sales calls, so I simply sent them a link to file a complaint. My boss said, "Yeah, well, now I'm forced to fire the assistant." I simply smiled and said, "Oh, that's so unfortunate. I'm so sorry to hear that." He confided with, "I guess you won this one." And I said, "Not a problem. I'll go ahead and post the new job ad." My next assistant was much better and way easier to work with. How I got my bully arrested for a completely different thing. My story begins 5 or 6 years ago. I was coming home from school and I was 14 or 15 years old. My commute included catching a bus from its last stop. The last stop of the bus was like a cul-de-sac where the bus turned around, waited for 10 to 15 minutes before it would go, while the driver had a rest and the passengers got on. I got on the bus and stood in the middle where there was a lot of people already on it and all the seats were taken. When I looked outside, I saw 3 boys, slightly older than me, sitting on a bench looking aggressively at me and talking. One was looking straight into my eyes. I'll call him main aggressor, MA for short. I could tell they were talking about me and straight away knew they had bad intentions. This goes on for a few minutes when the bus engine starts. Just before the doors closed and the bus sets off, they get on. MA comes right next to me and looks me right in the eyes about 2 inches away from me. I turned away and went to the front of the bus near the driver. Scared, I wanted to phone my father to wait for me at the bus stop, but my phone bill wasn't paid and my phone was useless. Just one more stop before mine, they suddenly get off the bus and ran away looking back at me. A few weeks later, while going to school, I catch a different bus, which set off from the same place. As the bus sets off, I see the same 3 guys outside. MA notices me right away and yells to the others, "Hey, that's the guy!" They started walking towards me, but the bus drove away. The third time I saw them was the scariest. It was about a year later, and I was coming home on a Saturday evening on the first bus. The bus was almost empty, and I was sitting in the back. I saw the same 3 guys get on the bus from the front door, and my blood ran cold. They hadn't noticed me yet, and I immediately rang my mom and told her to wait for me at the bus stop. I was looking out the window, pretending not to see them, and they were messing around at the front of the bus when MA noticed me. He smiled to the other 2 guys and walked up to me. Standing next to my seat, he started saying things like, "Nowhere to run now, and I finally gotcha," while pushing me. I didn't say anything and pretended he wasn't there. Luckily, my stop was coming, and as the bus stopped, I suddenly got up and ran to the door. He tried to grab me, but failed. I ran out of the bus and got in my mom's car, which was already at the bus stop. I looked back and saw all 3 of them getting off the bus and trying to chase the car. My district's small, and I found MA on social media and knew who he was. A typical aggressive teenager / wannabe gangster. Heard from a few friends that he's a well-known bully in our district. I was a very shy and timid person, so the experience stuck with me for quite a long time. And for 1 or 2 years after that, I was afraid to go near the bus stop or walk alone in the dark. I'd always look around in fear on the buses or when walking on the street. The revenge part. Fast forward to a year and a half ago. 20-year-old me starts a job at a construction company. I became a friend to most of the workers, including the foreman and the boss. They all liked me because I did my job well and I was generally friendly. I was working hard because I needed money, which helped my progress in the company quickly. I started as a construction worker, cleaning the construction site, carrying around materials, assisting form workers and rebar workers, etc. And about 6 months later, the foreman started giving me more complex tasks as well. About 2 months ago, we were removing form work with 2 of my colleagues when the foreman came around with another guy and said, "This is our new guy. He'll be working with you. Show him around and take care of him. It's his first job." When I looked at him, I was shocked. It was MA. Surprisingly, he didn't recognize me, probably because my appearance changed a lot over the last 5 years. But I hadn't forgotten his ugly face. Didn't give him any info about me that would make him remember, and he wasn't into talking a lot anyways. I didn't tell him any info because I felt it was nobody else's business. And at that moment, he didn't do anything wrong, but I just couldn't stand him and wanted to get rid of him ASAP. We have a storage at our construction site which held expensive tools and machines, drills, angle grinders, etc. And one morning we come to find it broken into with missing equipment. There's one security guard, but his kiosk is on the other side of the construction site next to the entrance, which is about 50 meters away, and his view to the storage is obstructed, so he didn't see anything. There was security cam footage, but it was low quality, and the 2 guys visible were wearing dark hoodies. Police were called, but there was nothing they could do. The next day, I come home from work, and one of my dad's buddies had stopped by to show him the new handheld circular saw he'd bought in secondhand for cheap. A bell immediately rang in my head. When I saw it, I instantly recognized it, and took a picture of it, saying I was interested in buying a similar one. My dad's friend told me who he got it from, and another check on social media I found out was MA's father. It all started coming together. I told my boss and foreman everything I knew and showed them the picture of the saw. My dad's friend also confirmed to my boss that MA is indeed the son of the guy he'd bought the saw from. Me and my boss went to the police and told them everything. The next morning, there were 2 officers on the construction site, and when MA showed up, they arrested him. The sweetest part was me telling handcuffed MA, "Nowhere to run now." He thought about it for a second and looked at me with wide open eyes. He suddenly remembered who I am. Anyway, under pressure, he told the police everything. Turns out his father persuaded him and one of his friends to steal the equipment. His father would then sell it and split the money with them. I don't know much about his father, but M.A. is held on multiple charges, including theft and trespassing. I also heard from a friend he's been arrested before for assault, but they let him go. This time, he's not getting away. Sometimes I feel bad for him, but then I remember what an a-hole he was and still look to be. How to divorce like a boss. Not me, but my mom. But it's basically the entire reason why I'm staying single. This was about 3-ish years ago, and I'm a freshman in college. For some backstory, my mom was a PA in neurosurgery, and he was an anesthesiologist in his residence, so drugs were a huge no-no. Anyway, he choked her out because she was pretty much done with his BS. She had severe tendinitis in her wrists and hands and feet and was barely able to walk and eat, and he wouldn't help around the house. They lived on 2 acres in the countryside with 6 chickens, 3 digs, and a pot-bellied pig with 4 ducks. She managed the entire place and 3 kids all by herself, and he wouldn't lift a finger. He would just come home from clinical rotations and smoke pot, do LSD, shrooms, and whatever else he could get his hands on. Soon, his antics became so heavy and frequent that it actually began to affect the animals. Mostly the smoke from cigarettes or doobies. And the animals would get high and do stupid stuff that would get them really sick. So my mom finally confronted him about it. Their somewhat civilized, raised-voiced argument turned into a full-blown screaming match that resulted in busted open windows and doors when my mom found out he was smoking pot in excess around me. The problem with it is that I have insanely low blood pressure, like to the point where if you smoke near me, I'll start to pass out since it lowers overall BP. He'd smoke on the front porch with the window open while I was playing video games inside, and he smoked to the point where I would faint while playing. My brother told me this, and he knew it was that because I'd be playing Dark Souls or some shit and would flat out just pass out and hit my head on the table in front of me. This would be a nightly occurrence, and my mom didn't see it as a problem until I was passed out for 12 hours, which is when my brother told her. I ended up leaving, and this'll be important later, to live with my grandma because fainting instead of actually falling asleep was really painful, and the screaming matches between my mom and stepdad had only gotten worse. Fast forward a few months, and my mom comes down for Christmas. I kid you not, she looked like someone from Auschwitz. She shaved her head before she came, but some hair grew back. She looked really pale, and she was thin to the point of fitting in my clothes. I'm really short and petite, 5'3", and pretty muscly compared to my mother being 5'11", and ripped from the heavy lifting around the home. Her carpal tunnel and tendinitis had gotten better so she could eat, walk, and do stuff, but it clearly still hurt. On New Year's, I ended up pouring her a shot of vodka. She usually had one right when the ball dropped, but this time she immediately swigged it down and took me into the bathroom where she unloaded. She told me that his antics had only gotten worse and worse, and he ended up snapping at the kids real bad, bringing his friends over and almost lighting the barn on fire with the pig inside. He sold her chickens while he was high, and we loved those chickens. He'd spend most of his paychecks on drugs as well. Eventually, she rambled on, saying that she was just tired of being treated like a slave, tired of fighting, and she just wanted to go back to the way things were when he was in med school. I told her straight up to get a divorce if she wasn't happy, and to move back to the country roads of WV, but she told me that the kids should have their dad, and they didn't want them to end up like me, emotionally scarred from custody transfers and separation. My dad was convicted of many awful things. Things we don't know if he actually did, but he did have a meth lab in his basement, was basically a prostitute, would physically and emotionally abuse me, would suck my mom's money dry for drugs, and had 7 diseases, all starting with the letter H. Don't worry, I'm clean. My mom knew that my dad was beyond saving, but she truly cared about my stepdad and wanted to rebuild their relationship. Fast forward a few weeks, and I had found out that my stepdad was stealing pain medication, local anesthesia, and narcotics from the hospital, and getting high off of them. She threatened to report him to his residency program, and he began choking her until he broke her hyoid bone. My brother saw the entire thing go down and called 911. My mom's only still alive because it was only a stress fracture and not a green stick fracture that would have wrapped around the rest of her throat. Immediately after surgery, she filed a restraining order and left to the previous house that they still owned. Soon, each of them found a lawyer, and my stepdad, with some help from his wealthy family, was planning on taking my 2 younger siblings from my mom. She found out when she was drunk and scrolling through his phone that was the last straw before she files for divorce. Because of his wealthy and pathological lying shitsy of a family, the case looked like my mother's loss. They denied all of her claims, saying that my mom was crazy and bipolar. She is mentally ill, having anxiety and depression, but she is by no means insane. She's just explosive when angry, mostly because her parents were. They also claimed she didn't take her meds. Not true, and that she was constantly fighting to the point that the windows and doors were broken down and I couldn't take it. And they claimed that she was a lazy, jobless slob. Also not true. Like I said, she was a neurosurgery PA. They earn a $95K salary. She had to quit her job because they were cutting her hours, and in the state they moved to, PAs couldn't prescribe medication, so basically she could only work in the OR, but they have 12-hour shifts, and my mom has 2 kids who need to be taken care of. What my stepdad neglected to mention was that he did steal those narcotics from the hospital. In fact, he actually denied it. And when he was on the phone with the attorney, he accidentally let it slip out that he met with the narcotics police. Basically, got busted, and her reaction was, wow, so she wasn't lying. And that basically unfolded into finding the original documents to ones edited by my stepdad's family, and it became an open and shut case. My mom had full custody and 60% of the money, as well as the antique BMW from the 60s. She was very adamant about that one. But it doesn't stop there, boys. My mom is the kind of person who will put white vinegar in your wine for shits and giggles. So she decided to report his residency. At first, they said they'd look into it, but they ended up not getting back to her. She ends up talking to an advisor, and lo and behold, not 1, not 2, but 5 people got kicked out for drugs. And if another one got kicked out, they'd be forced to shut it down. So my mom decides to get the divorce and restraining order into the mix, and the whole slew of things that came with it. Since it basically violated the Hippocratic Oath and, well, the law, he wasn't really that trustworthy of a doctor anymore, and they kicked him out in the interest of patience and subsequently shut the entire program down. On top of that, she made sure that it stayed on his permanent record, completely disabling him from ever reapplying to a new residency program. She then went the extra mile to get the dog to piss in his house while he was on vacation in Vegas, charge his credit card to pay the mortgage until she found a new job in neonatology, get the kids to completely ghost him, and she did a B&E, the door was unlocked so I don't know if it actually was, and took the PS4, Switch, and Wi-Fi with some home furniture. She also sold his Gucci clothes on eBay. I don't know how much she made though. Later on, about a year later, my mom finds out that the family's trying to file a suit against her to get back $50,000. They take it to claims court, but then my mom busts out the case from way back then, along with some medical documents pertaining to said case, like her carpal tunnel and tendinitis, and she turns up the dial to maximum amount a doctor, my stepdad's father was a plastic surgeon, can be sued for in that particular state, $200,000. The lawsuit goes on for about 6 months, and then my mom one day hits me up and says she's got $200K in her pocket. She ended up putting that into a bank account and is beginning to help me pay for college. If she has enough, med school. I've always loved medicine, and this whole thing has never changed my view of it. Personally, I'd like to do college by myself, but I am going to need help in med school, because by my second year, I'll be $100K in debt. My mom's now happy and single, still rocking the short hair, and is extremely successful. She cut off contact with my stepdad, so I don't really know how he's doing, and frankly, I don't really care. Yeah, TLDR, don't get with drug addicts, especially if they're in the medical field. My mom's a vengeful bitch, and I love her. My brother's a hero. Edit. So I found out that cannabis actually raises blood pressure. Now I'm not actually sure what the hell he was smoking to make me pass out. This also came from my brother, so I'm also not sure if he was telling the truth either. I'm just going by what he was saying. He said it would gather in the house, so it obviously wasn't instantaneous, but it was certainly concerning. Edit 2. I also forgot to mention that at the time, we lived in a super old house that had no AC, just a bunch of fans and a huge glass door that opened on the front deck to the living room, where the TV was, which was always open because it was hot as hell inside. I'm not sure why he would have them open at that time. It was probably just unintentional, but he did. And there you have it, folks. The end of the epics. If you like this story, be sure to leave a like on the video, as well as make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on. That way you could stay up to date with all the latest and the greatest. As always, my name's Ryan, the official host here on Reddit Voice, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.